This is the Pacific Northwest. Wherever you look, it is a land of exquisite natural beauty. In this video journey through Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, we will explore many of the major attractions in these states, and you will see why the Pacific Northwest lures an increasing number of new residents every year and has become a magnet for more and more vacationers. Our tour begins in the Olympic Peninsula, in the northwest corner of the state of Washington. It is a vast area of over 1 million acres, bounded on the west by the Pacific, on the north by the Strait, and on the east by the Puget Sound. More than 57 unspoiled miles of coastline in all. Rising from the center of the peninsula are the rugged Olympic Mountains, which are surrounded by the Olympic National Park and National Forest. In many respects, the area remains unchanged from those early days when the first European settlers appeared on the scene. The dense forests still seem almost impenetrable, and the glacial streams remain wild and unpolluted. In looking around, it's easy to see why Washington has become known as the Evergreen State. The verdant landscape is perpetuated by the heavy precipitation which falls in the western portion of the state. And the heaviest rains of all are found on the peninsula. Annual amounts of 150 to 200 inches of moisture are not uncommon. The resulting rainforests are unique in this country. The Hoh rainforest is an excellent example. Off U.S. Highway 101, near the small town of Forks, the dense vegetation often threatens to choke off the many trails which run through the area. The Visitor Center at the Hoh provides informative displays as to the history and the flora and fauna in the area. It also serves as a jumping-off point for many of the self-guided nature tours, including the much photographed Hall of Mosses. The park and forest also abound with wildlife. Deer and the famed Olympic elk are found throughout the area, as well as less intimidating animals. At the northeast tip of the peninsula is the city of Port Townsend, one of the oldest communities in the state. Because of its location at the entrance to the Sound, Port Townsend became a very active trade center in the late 19th century. The town's Victorian architecture is considered some of the finest in the country. In addition to the Victorian style, the city also has several excellent examples of other types of architecture as well. The Jefferson County Courthouse on Walker Street combines Romanesque with Gothic influences, as well as elements of a fairy tale castle. But perhaps the most unusual edifice in Port Townsend is the century-old Tree of Heaven. Supposedly, the structure was a gift from a Chinese emperor, but historians have been unable to verify the tale. The city also has a major ferry terminal and is an excellent point of departure for further explorations of the Puget Sound and the San Juan Islands. The islands are a favorite cruising spot for local boaters and sailors. There are 172 in all. They range in size from small barren outcroppings to Orcas Island with more than 57 square miles of beaches, coves, and camping spots. The waters teem with marine life and the fishing is terrific. Salmon, cod, and flounder are among the most popular catches. Seals, dolphins, and killer whales are also often seen, and scuba divers tell of encounters with fearsome-looking but shy octopus. The larger islands in the Sound are populated, with many of the residents using the ferry system to commute to the mainland for work. Farms and forests flourish along with a very active tourist trade. The numerous bays and coves are popular with boaters and fishermen, as are the many parks and scenic shoreline. Deception Pass State Park on the northern tip of the island is the largest. With nearly 3,000 acres, it sits overlooking the cliffline channel which separates Whidbey from Fidalgo Island. In addition to an underwater marine preserve, the park also contains a number of freshwater lakes. Another popular attraction in the Sound is Blake Island Marine State Park. The 475-acre island has a variety of outdoor recreation facilities, but it also features a glimpse of some of the local Indian culture. Tillicum Village is the centerpiece for this display. There you will find a Northwest Coast log house where Native American art and artifacts are on display. All in all, a trip to Blake Island is both an interesting and rewarding experience. The island is accessible only by boat, and the easiest way to get there is from the Seattle waterfront on one of the regularly scheduled runs. Seattle is the largest city in the Pacific Northwest, and with more than 1.6 million residents in the metro area, it continues to be one of the fastest growing areas in the country. The Emerald City, as it is called, is sandwiched on a long, narrow strip of land between the Cascade Mountains and the Puget Sound, accessible in some directions only by floating bridge. Originally, Seattle was a lumbering center, and nearly all of the buildings were made of wood. Like Chicago, it too had a great fire. In 1889, a painter's glue pot boiled over, and most of the city went up in flames. The residents quickly began rebuilding, but this time with a broader and less flammable selection of materials. Much of the flavor of that era is captured in the Pioneer Square Historic District. Located just south of downtown near the waterfront, this 30-square block area features many historic structures which were constructed after the Great Fire, including Smith Tower, which, when it was built in 1905, at 42 stories, was the tallest building west of the Mississippi. At one time, the area was at the heart of Skid Road. Initially, the term referred to the route along which logs were transported to the sawmill by means of skids to help them through the mire that was created by the frequent rains. Flophouses, saloons, and other dens of iniquity sprung up along the path to cater to the needs of the weary loggers and mill hands after a hard day's work. Eventually, the term was altered to Skid Row and entered the language as a phrase applied to rundown areas in most major cities. Contemporary Pioneer Square is far from run down. It is a tribute to urban redevelopment with countless shops, boutiques, nightclubs, restaurants, and sidewalk cafes. A landscape pedestrian mall extends through most of the district, complete with a central waterfall and stream around its perimeter. A long fly ball from the square is the Kingdome, one of the largest indoor sports arenas in the country. In addition to being home of the Seattle Seahawks of the National Football League and the Baseball Mariners, it is also the site of frequent shows and concerts. You will also find yourself just a few steps from Seattle's so-called International District, the heart of the city's Oriental community. Populated mainly by Japanese and Chinese, the area offers a variety of import shops, cultural facilities, and, of course, a number of excellent restaurants. If your tastes run more towards seafood than Mugu Gai Pan, that craving can also be easily satisfied. From the chowder stands along the waterfront to posh salmon houses overlooking the city, the variety and availability of fresh marine delicacies is second to none. One of the most popular places to shop for these and other items is the Pike Place Market. Originally opened as a farmer's market in 1907, Pike Place now offers a wide array of goods and services. In addition to the fresh seafood and produce, the complex also features a variety of arts and crafts. The market also has a number of shops and restaurants, as well as street performers who are eager to please. The Pike Street hill climb connects the market to the waterfront by means of a series of stairs, elevators, and a skywalk. Getting from one place to another in Seattle has become something of an art form. You will be hard-pressed to find any other city which has so many different means of transportation. At the waterfront, there is a fleet of cruise ships which regularly ply the waters to Canada and Alaska. There are also ferry terminals which provide regular commuter service for those who live on the islands and on the Olympic Peninsula. Inexpensive trolleys zip up and down the waterfront, and bus service in the downtown area is absolutely free. But perhaps the most famous of Seattle's transit wonders is the monorail. Built in 1962 for the city's World Fair, the monorail has proved to be more than just a curiosity. With parking in the core city now at a premium, many now leave their cars at the more spacious lots at the Seattle Center and are whisked downtown on the rail. The trip takes just 95 seconds. Although somewhat north of downtown proper, the Seattle Center has become the cultural hub of the city. This 74-acre facility is home to the Opera Association, the Symphony, and the nationally acclaimed Seattle Repertory Theater Company. In addition, the center features a year-round amusement park, the Pacific Science Center, and the Seattle Children's Museum. Perhaps the most well-known landmark at the center is the Space Needle. In this complex, designed to represent a look at life in the 21st century, the 605-foot-high spire is hard to miss. At the top, 2 restaurants revolve in a full circle every hour, and the view from the observation deck is spectacular. A few miles north of the center, in the community of Ballard, is the Lake Washington Ship Canal and Hiram M. Chittenden Locks. The canal connects the saltwater of the Sound with the freshwater in Lake Union and the 18-mile-long Lake Washington, which runs south down the eastern border of Seattle. The locks, used by both ships and pleasure boaters, are among the busiest in the nation. Built into the locks is a series of fish ladders which facilitate the movement of trout and salmon between the bodies of water so that they may spawn. The scenery at the locks is complemented by a 7-acre botanical garden. The garden features more than 500 species of trees, shrubs, and plants. Exotic species from all over the world have been combined with plants native to the Pacific Northwest. Another fine garden is located in Volunteer Park in the city's Capitol Hill district. The park features more than 44 acres of formal gardens and lawn, as well as a conservatory with a large collection of cacti, orchids, and subtropical plants. At the heart of the park is the Seattle Art Museum. The museum is world-renowned for its collection of Oriental art, Chinese and Indian jade, and one of only 2 ceilings in America done by the 18th century Italian artist Tiepolo. Another of the city's museums pays tribute to Seattle's leading industry, the manufacture of airplanes. The Museum of Flight is located in the restored Red Barn, which was the Boeing Company's first facility. The displays depict the history of flight from the 13th century through the 1930s, and more than 30 aircraft are on exhibit, including the 1950 Aerocar, the first automobile ever to be certified by the FAA for flight. There are also specially designed hands-on exhibits for children to interact with aeronautical equipment and to learn a variety of skills involving designing, building, maintaining, and flying aircraft. A minimum of 3 hours should be allowed for the tour. For a close-up look at modern aircraft construction techniques, a visit to the Boeing 747-767 division is recommended. The plant is located about 40 miles north of Seattle, near the city of Everett. The tours tend to fill up quickly, so reservations are recommended. It should also be noted that cameras and children under the age of 10 are not allowed. About 40 miles south of Seattle is the city of Tacoma, home of the Point Defiance Park. The 700-acre compound sits on a promontory overlooking the Puget Sound and is one of the most diverse urban parks in the state. There are hiking and nature trails as well as picnicking facilities, or you can rent a rod and reel and drop a line from the fishing pier or from one of the many boats for hire. But if you want to see your fish really close up, take a walk through the Point Defiance Zoo and Aquarium. The aquarium is perhaps the best in the Pacific Northwest. It features many of the species found in the nearby sound. In addition, there is a South Pacific section which focuses on tropical varieties and sharks. For the kids, the park contains an area known as Never Never Land. In a quiet, 10-acre wooded setting, more than 30 scenes from children's literature are depicted. The park is also the site of Fort Nisqually, the first outpost of the Hudson's Bay Company on the Puget Sound. The fort features a replica of the oldest standing structure in the state, and the exhibits depict the history of the fur trading era. A few miles southwest of Tacoma is the state capital of Olympia, located at the southern end of the Puget Sound. In addition to being the seat of government, Olympia is famous for its oysters and its beer. It also happens to be one of the most beautiful state capitals in the country, with extensive Japanese gardens, antique malls, and a number of outstanding architectural efforts. The State Capitol Museum is another of Olympia's major attractions. The facility is housed in an old Spanish-style mansion, which originally was the home of one of the city's first mayors. The exhibits pertain to Washington's territorial and state government, and there is a gallery displaying changing exhibits of art and history. About 50 miles east of Olympia, in the community of Eatonville, animals native to the region are on display. Northwest Trek is a 600-acre park which allows most of the animals to be shown in their native habitat. Moose, caribou, and elk are among some of the more popular exhibits. There are guided tram tours through the preserve, as well as several walk-through exhibits. As you move east in the state, you are rather quickly confronted by the Cascade Range. This rugged spine of mountains runs south from Canada through both Washington and Oregon and presents a natural barrier which dramatically changes the climate and character of the eastern portion of these states. The average height of the range is from 5,000 to 8,000 feet, with 4 of Washington's peaks soaring much higher. Mount Rainier tops more than 14,400 feet. There used to be a 5th giant among these titans, but in May of 1980, with a low rumble and a sharp blast, Mount St. Helens was reduced to a mere 8,364 feet. The catastrophic eruption was a grim reminder of the powerful volcanic forces which originally shaped the Northwest's geography. Today, 110,000 acres around the peak have been designated as the Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument. Occasionally, the mountain still rumbles and access to the area is limited. One can only imagine the incredible forces lurking inside, which blew over 1,300 feet off the top of the mountain and sent a plume of smoke and ashes spewing 80,000 feet into the sky. Life around Mount St. Helens has slowly returned to normal, but evidence of the massive destruction produced by the eruption is still plain to see. To the north of Mount St. Helens perches Mount Rainier, seemingly serene in its glacial splendor. But it too owes its birth to the molten magma which gushed from a fissure within the Earth's crust. Mount Rainier National Park is, in fact, considered one of the most beautiful in the country. And the mountain's glacial cap makes it even more interesting to both scientists and tourists. On the eastern side of the mountains, in the northern part of the state, a trough left by one of these glaciers has formed one of the most stunning lakes in the Pacific Northwest, Lake Chelan. The lake extends more than 55 miles into the Cascades and is fed by 27 glaciers and 59 streams. The waters are exceedingly cold and deep. The bottom is often 1,500 feet beneath the surface. The lake and its heavily wooded shores provide a full array of outdoor recreation. And for those who just want to look, excursion boats make frequent runs across the dark blue waters. About 50 miles south of the southern end of the lake is one of the most productive apple-growing regions in the world, the Wenatchee Valley. It is hard to believe that less than 100 years ago, this area was a barren wasteland. As we have seen, as the warm Japanese air currents from the Pacific move across the ocean and the Sound, they become heavy with moisture. But they must rise in order to get over the mountains, and as they do, they release the moisture in the form of rain or snow at the higher elevations. By the time the airflow gets into the central part of the state, they have very little moisture left to give, and the land is actually semi-arid. The construction of the Highline Canal to divert water from the Columbia River at the turn of the century was a major factor in transforming this land into a fruitful plain. One of the attractions along this section of the river is the Rocky Reach Dam just north of the city. A large L-shaped structure, some 5,000 feet in length, it is a major source of electrical power. The dam also functions as a sort of museum. There are displays of flowers, arts, and crafts. Exhibits trace life along the river for the past 10,000 years, and the story of man's use of electricity is also told. The dam also makes provision for the fish which must move up the river to spawn. A 1,700-foot fish ladder allows them to climb over the man-made obstacle so that they may obey their natural urges. There is also an excellent viewpoint which allows visitors to watch their progress. Wenatchee is also home to another outstanding display by Mother Nature, the Omi Gardens. Built on a high bluff overlooking both the valley and the river, evergreen trees and ground vegetation blend with the rugged rock formations to create a variety of effects. Stone paths connect the various levels of the garden, and there are also several secluded pools, rustic shelters, and a wishing well. Much of the central part of the state remains a hard, dry place. The military uses vast acreage near Yakima as a firing range. An equally large piece of ground near Hanford is used as a nuclear reservation by the U.S. Department of Energy. But the work to reclaim the land for productive farming and recreational use continues. Near Coulee City, in the north-central portion of the river basin, these efforts are represented by Coulee Dam. It is said to be the most massive concrete structure in the world, 550 feet high, 500 feet wide at its base, and more than 5,200 feet long. Not only does the dam generate enormous amounts of electrical energy, it also assists in providing flood control and allows the Columbia River to be used for irrigation. The dam is even an interesting place to visit at night. Each evening between 9:30 and 10:30, the spillway is illuminated by a laser light show. Another of the sites near Coulee City is Dry Falls. The area was created during the last ice age as the glaciers retreated, chiseling massive gashes in the surface of the earth. The largest of these is known as Grand Coulee. At one time, a torrent of water more than 3.5 miles wide plunged some 400 feet over these cliffs. There is an interpretive center at Dry Falls, but the road is rather rough. However, the area can be viewed more comfortably from State Route 17. As you continue east across the state, the farms become more frequent again. Patches of timber begin to reappear, and in the distance is the dim outline of more mountains. You are entering some of the most prolific wheat-growing country in the world. You will also note that the climate is considerably different from that on the western side of the state. The summers are much hotter, and the winters far more severe. In the city of Spokane, residents have devised an interesting way to deal with both the heat and the cold. Many of the buildings in the downtown area are connected by an elaborate system of enclosed skywalks which allow pedestrians to move from one place to another in relative comfort. Spokane is the second largest city in the state. It began as a small trading post, the first non-Indian settlement in the Pacific Northwest. Much of that history is preserved in the Cheney Coles Memorial Museum. The restored Campbell House next to the museum recreates the atmosphere of those early days. In addition, the museum features some excellent exhibits relating to the geology and natural history of the Inland Empire. Of particular note is the museum's extensive collection of Indian arts and handicrafts. It is known to be one of the finest in the U.S. A broader look at this country's original residents can be had at the Museum of Native American Cultures, which is also located in Spokane. Here, there are 4 floors of permanent exhibits and a gallery of changing exhibits of people from the New World, from Eskimos to Incas. Spokane is known as the Lilac City, and flowers and gardens are found throughout the community. Some of the best examples are located in Manitou Park. In addition to a special section devoted to lilacs, there are also formal gardens, as well as those devoted to roses, perennials, and the Japanese art of horticulture. You will also find a beautiful Japanese garden in Riverfront Park, but there is much, much more to this 50-acre compound, which was originally developed for the World Expo in 1974. Many of the attractions, such as Canada Island, originally built for the Expo, remain. In addition, there is an opera house, convention center, planetarium, IMAX theater, and the Eastern Washington Science Center. Of special interest to the kids is an antique carousel. The carousel, built in 1909 by Charles Loof, is hand-carved and still in perfect working condition. Just east of Spokane, you cross the Idaho state line. This is the so-called panhandle of the Gem State. Less than 50 miles wide and more than 100 long, this inland isthmus contains some of the most spectacular scenery in the western United States. This is mountain country, but it's also the home of several large lakes: Priest, Pend Oreille, and Coeur d'Alene. The latter once cited by National Geographic magazine as one of the 5 most beautiful lakes in the world. The lake, surrounded by jagged mountains and dense, lush forests, is long and narrow. Many parts of the shoreline are inaccessible other than by boat. The undeveloped Maury State Park is one such area and considered a primitive jewel. Coeur d'Alene is also a birdwatcher's paradise. The lake provides habitat for one of the country's largest populations of ospreys, and bald eagles can often be seen diving out of the sky to snatch a finny meal from the deep blue waters. Those waters are a little cold for comfortable swimming, but boating, fishing, and sailing are popular during the warmer months. The hills and valleys around Coeur d'Alene are dotted with mines and processing facilities. Mining is big business in the state. Phosphate, silver, gold, molybdenum, and zinc are found in abundance. In fact, the area is so rich that just one mine alone is said to have yielded more silver than the entire famed Comstock lode. And since the industry began, it is estimated that more than $200 billion in gold have been extracted from Idaho's earth. As you move south down the 500-mile length of the state, the boundaries widen to more than 300 miles. It is our 13th largest in terms of area, and yet has only slightly more than 1 million residents. In other words, you can always find plenty of elbow room. If you happen to venture near the small community of Arco, about halfway between Boise and Idaho Falls in the southern part of the state, you will come upon a site which is absolutely eerie. Vast lava fields covered by cinder cones with large central vents give the countryside an otherworldly air. You have arrived at Craters of the Moon National Monument. These strange formations resembling the lunar surface are the result of volcanic activity dating back some 15,000 years. The 83-square-mile park contains more basaltic volcanic features than any other area of its size in the continental United States. The cones were formed when jets of molten rock were spewed into the air through weakened fissures in the Earth's crust. But don't worry, the last eruption occurred some 2,000 years ago. Throughout the area, you will find other peculiar volcanic phenomena as well. Lava caves with tubes ranging up to 50 feet in diameter, and some are hundreds of feet long. They make for fascinating exploration, but sturdy shoes and a heavy-duty flashlight are advised. In the capital of Boise, the state's natural wonders, as well as those made by man, are explored in the Discovery Center of Idaho. The center features more than 75 exhibits with emphasis on hands-on participation. The environment is designed to stimulate the curiosity and focuses on the excitement of scientific discovery. While in Boise, a visit to the state capitol complex is also recommended. It is truly one of the most impressive buildings in the city. Tours are conducted Mondays through Saturdays, and there are several exhibits paying tribute to the state's leading industries. The gemstone collection is particularly nice. A replica of the statue Winged Victory, a gift from the city of Paris, and a yellow pine sculpture of George Washington are also of interest. As you might have guessed, agriculture and forestry are still the leading contributors to the state's economy. Idaho's potatoes get most of the publicity, but the rich soil and ample water supply produce other major crops as well. Hay, oats, barley, beans, peas, sugar, beets, and fruit are also grown in massive quantities. Tourism is another major industry. Camping, boating, hunting, and fishing are superb. And for those seeking that extra special adrenaline rush, whitewater rafting down the state's world-class rapids will offer all that you can handle. The Salmon and the Snake River through Lower Hells Canyon offer some magnificent sights along the way, but these are not trips to be taken without an experienced guide. The Hells Canyon National Recreation Area straddles the Idaho-Oregon state line. With more than 603,000 acres, the area presents a variety of outdoor recreational opportunities. From the desert-like canyon floor to the alpine lakes in the Seven Devils region, it is a backpacker's delight. Populations of elk, deer, bighorn sheep, mountain goats, cougars, and many smaller animals are found throughout the refuge. The varying species of plant life is seemingly endless. But the main attraction is the gorge itself, the deepest in North America. The black basalt cliffs carved by the roaring Snake River average more than 6,600 feet in height, with the deepest canyon measuring nearly 8,000 feet. A boat trip along this 70-mile stretch is truly awe-inspiring. Eventually, the Snake joins forces with the Columbia River as it moves inexorably on its journey to the sea. Forming a large portion of the border between Oregon and Washington, the Columbia River offers some interesting sights of its own. The river has always been a natural thoroughfare from the parched barrens of the east through the rugged Cascades to the Pacific beyond. In 1907, an eccentric lawyer and staunch Quaker by the name of Samuel Hill came upon a spot along the high banks on what is now the Washington side of the river. He felt it had the potential to become a farming paradise. He called it Mary Hill after his wife. But the unexpected attraction in this peaceful community is the Mary Hill Museum of Art. The collection includes both American and European art, with several Rodin originals. In addition, there are French mannequins, Russian icons, antique chess sets, and a number of personal items donated by Queen Marie of Romania. The views from the bluffs around Mary Hill show the majesty and power of the river. And not far west, that power has been harnessed in one of the largest hydroelectric facilities in the world by Bonneville Dam. Guided tours of the facility, including the powerhouse and massive generators, are available. The center also contains a small museum which features displays covering early Indian history and the development of the fishing industry and fish life cycles. Not far from this area is the Bridge of the Gods, which allows you to cross over to the Oregon side of the river, where a major fish hatchery is located, and additional displays on the locks and dam. This area of the Columbia River Gorge has been designated as a National Scenic Area. Both Interstate 84 and US 30, which was the first paved road in the state, are scenic highways, with the latter providing the more spectacular views of the 2,000-foot cliffs. Oak woods and grasslands are characteristic of the eastern portion of the drive, while rainforests and stunning waterfalls are more typical in the west. 11 different cascades are found in the area, with the highest being Multnomah Falls at 620 feet. The gorge is a gateway to a vast outdoor recreational playground. In addition to the sites along the river, the highway also connects with the Mount Hood Scenic Loop through the Cascade Range. The loop may be traveled by car, or there is also a small railroad which runs through the area. The gem of the tour is the mountain itself, rising more than 11,200 feet above sea level. The peak is surrounded by the Mount Hood National Forest, which encompasses more than 1.1 million acres of wilderness and developed recreational areas. The mountain supports several living glaciers, and their runoff feeds 160 lakes and more than 4,000 miles of streams. About 50 miles south of the park on US 97 is the city of Bend. It is a pleasant town of some 17,600 which caters to a year-round tourist trade. In addition to a variety of recreational facilities, it is the home of the High Desert Museum. Nature trails meander through the 20-acre park, which features several displays representing the culture and natural history of the arid Intermountain region. There are exhibits of plants and animals, both indoor and out. Guest participation is encouraged. Of special interest are the feeding of the otters and watching the porcupines. There are also daily demonstrations by birds of prey. Bend is also the northern end of the Cascade Lakes Highway, an 87-mile trek through the Deschutes National Forest along the foothills of the range. The route passes by more than a dozen lakes and reservoirs, and if it can be done on water, you'll find your recreational opportunity here. Directly south of the scenic highway, atop the crest of the Cascade Range, is Crater Lake National Park. The lake is another of those natural wonders which owes its birth to the volcanic activity which racked the area some 6,800 years ago. At one time, this was the site of Mount Mazama, a 12,000-foot volcano which jutted into the northwestern sky. Then, violent eruptions released the molten magma from deep within the mountain's center, and the top of the mountain literally fell into itself. Over the years, the resulting crater, or caldera as it is called by geologists, filled with water, forming the lake, which is 26 miles around. The lava cliffs around the lake range in height from 500 to 2,000 feet, and the waters are startlingly blue. In many places, it's more than 1,900 feet to the bottom. More than 570 species of plants are found in the park, which is particularly noted for its wildflowers. The high points around the rim are reached by a series of hiking trails and provide dazzling vistas for the shutterbug. For those who prefer to do their sightseeing by car, the Rim Drive is recommended. This 33-mile road encircles the crater, but it should be noted that towed trailers are not permitted in some sections. However, parking for such rigs is provided. Highway 62 carries you out of the park and into the state's southwestern corner and back toward the more temperate climate of the coast. There are a couple of stops you may wish to make along the way. One is in the city of Ashland. A town of some 15,000, Ashland represents a kind of crossroads for cultural and outdoor activity. Several food, wine, and arts festivals are held in the city during the course of the year. But most of the time, it is the Bard of Avon who occupies the city's center stage. Ashland is home of the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, which runs from February through October and is one of the oldest celebrations of the writer's works in the Western Hemisphere. There are 3 theaters which grace the festival's grounds, an outdoor Elizabethan stagehouse and 2 indoor palladiums. In addition to the performances of the plays themselves, there are several exhibits featuring Shakespearean costumes and stagecraft, and guided tours of what goes on behind the scenes. If spelunking, as opposed to sonnets, is more your cup of tea, then not far from Ashland you will find the Oregon Caves National Monument. The caverns are located inside Mount Elijah in the Siskiyou Mountains. A tour of the caves is moderately strenuous and a guide is required, but the spectacular underground sights are well worth the effort. Known as the Marble Halls of Oregon because of the mountain's composition, the many galleries in the cave are stunning. Some of the underground rooms are nearly 6 stories high, and the largest is about 250 feet in length. From the caves, we head north to Roseburg in the heart of Oregon's timber country. With mountains on one side and ocean on the other, this valley offers a full gamut of outdoor activities. Fish and game are in plentiful supply. And for a closer look, there is the Wildlife Safari, which offers 600 acres of zoological park. You can either walk or drive through the compound, but it should be noted that neither convertibles nor pets are allowed. The park features hundreds of exotic animals which are allowed to roam freely through the natural surroundings. In addition to the safaris, there are animal shows as well as elephant and train rides. And for the youngsters, there's a petting zoo. In the distance, the Pacific beckons. Both Oregon and Washington have some of the longest beaches in the world, broken only by rocky headlands which add to the pristine beauty. The shoreline is constantly changing. In some places, the big trees creep very near the water's edge, and in others, miles of large sand dunes offer desolate tranquility. Sunbathing can sometimes be a chancy proposition, but the clam diggers and surf fishermen don't seem to mind. Rock hunters are also often drawn to the shores, particularly around Agate Beach. Charter boats ply the offshore waters in search of salmon and tuna. For others, the beach provides an opportunity to simply sit and relax. In the far northwest corner of Oregon, where the Columbia River empties into the Pacific, sits the community of Astoria. The city was the first settlement in the state, and its history goes back to 1805 when Lewis and Clark camped there to mark the end of their long trek. Fort Clatsop was built on the site where these two pioneers rested. The fort is now a national memorial. It features a replica of the log compound originally constructed by the pair, and the expedition is commemorated through a living history program which uses the clothing and equipment and portrays the lifestyle of the era. Overlooking the fort on Coxcomb Hill is the Astoria Column, erected in 1926 as a further tribute to the discovery, exploration, and settlement of the area. The 125-foot high tower stands above the river, offering stunning views in every direction. The river has always played a central role in the history and development of the region, and artifacts and displays from that history are preserved at the Columbia River Maritime Museum. Not far up the Columbia, the channel is joined by the Willamette River, forming a natural deepwater port. And here, the city of Portland arose. Originally, the settlement was named Stumptown because of all the snags left over from clearing the dense timber to make way for the town. The two founders each felt it should be called after their respective hometowns. A flip of the coin made the decision, and Portland could now have just as easily been Boston, Oregon, rather than following in the footsteps of its namesake in Maine. To its residents, it is the city of roses, and gardens of these flowers flourish throughout the metropolitan area. The Rose Festival is its most important annual celebration. There are several examples of this civic love affair with the thorny bush, such as the sunken beds at the Peninsula Rose Garden, but perhaps the best is found in Washington Park, where the International Rose Test Garden is located. The gardens were established in 1917 by the Portland Rose Society. Throughout the 4 acres, more than 400 varieties of the flower are grown. The blooms begin to come forth in late May and continue into the fall. If your interests lie more in fauna than flora, visit the Metro Washington Park Zoo. The park is world famous for its captive breeding program of rare and endangered species. Asian elephants have been a particular success. Most of the major exhibits simulate the natural habitats of the species on display. The Alaska Tundra exhibit is an excellent example. Portland is a city of interesting architecture. The old blends comfortably with the new, and it has long been a community attractive to artists and artisans. A tribute to this tradition is found at the Oregon Art Institute. The Institute is actually a college, a film center, and a museum all rolled into one. Founded in 1892, it is the oldest visual and media arts center in the Pacific Northwest. You will find that Oregonians are quite serious about their history. That pride is evident at the Oregon Historical Society, where many of the state's artifacts are preserved. Not far from Portland, in the community of Newburgh, the history of the state is celebrated in a different way. The 568 acres of Champoeg State Park contains several structures which relate to the establishment of the first provisional American government in the region. Each summer, during July, there is a pageant which depicts the evolution of Oregon statehood. Exhibits at the Visitor Center also focus on that theme. The Robert Newell House and the Hoover Minthorn House Museum feature more tangible memorabilia. From these rugged beginnings sprang the spirit which built the Pacific Northwest we see today, a vibrant region which combines modern technology with old-fashioned virtues and a love of the great outdoors. Now, however, our time amongst the trees and the water is at an end. We hope this brief visit has inspired you to plan your own adventure to the Pacific Northwest. After all, the best journey is the one you take yourself. To make your trip as enjoyable as possible, plan ahead. And be sure to consult your local AAA office for current and detailed information on travel routes, accommodations, restaurants, and the attractions you wish to visit. And above all else, have a great trip.